Hereby, I open the academic ceremony in which Mandani Ntekouli will defend her academic thesis titled Bridging Individual and Group Perspective in Psychopathology, Computational Modeling Approaches Using Ecological Momentary Assessment Data. Dear candidate, may I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis.
Thank you. Dear Prorector, members of the committee, colleagues, family and friends, in the next 15 minutes, I will give you a brief summary of my PhD work titled as Bridging Individual and Group Perspectives in Psychopathology, Computational Modeling Approaches Using Ecological Momentary Assessment Data. Emotions evolve over time, throughout the day, or even within a few hours. Sometimes they're slightly fluctuating, or even have some increased big spikes, short-term big spikes. For example, I guess everyone has experienced increased stress before an important meeting or presentation, like is my emotion right now. But this is normal. It's part of the regular psychological functioning. However, when these stress or in general emotions become persistent over time, or they have extremes up and downs, these become more problematic, and this probably indicates signs of psychopathology. And what is psychopathology? Psychopathology is the scientific study of mental disorders, where we look at conditions like depression, bipolar disorders, anxiety, eating disorders, etc. And how we study it? We study it through the traditional medical model, which means that after checking several diagnostic criteria, we can make a diagnosis or not. For example, in the case of depression, we need 5 out of 9 symptoms out of this list to understand if a person is diagnosed with depression or not. However, mental disorders are way more complex than fixed categories based on predefined symptoms. So this leads to several challenges regarding both diagnosis and treatment. So we shouldn't look at whether a person is diagnosed or not, has a disorder or not, but rather focus on which symptoms appear, how they interact over time, and they evolve over time. So this is where the conceptualization shift to the network approach has helped. According to the network approach to psychopathology, mental disorders can be viewed as a complex system of interacting variables. And this can be represented by networks, where we have each variable, like sad, concentrated, tired, to become a variable, a node in the network, and the edges represent their interactions. To fully capture the whole complexity of mental disorders in this work, we take advantage of recent methodological advancements using ecological momentary assessment data. During an EMA study, which means using digital questionnaires and data from smartphone sensors, we have the opportunity to collect many variables regarding emotions, how happy they are, sad, tired, concentrated, as well as behaviors, experiences, social interactions, and context. And these evolve over time. But these observations are not independent. These are part of a rich, multi-level EMA data structure. For each individual, we can collect all these variables many times a day for a predefined period of some weeks or months. And this is repeated for multiple individuals, leading us to have a multivariate time series dataset for each individual. And as we have seen, EMA variables interact with each other, but we see now that they interact also dynamically over time. So now, the problem is how we can model these dynamical EMA interactions. And for this, we use temporal models. And with that, we mean that we use the EMA variables at one time point T, for example, as an input to a model, in order to predict what is happening at the next time point t plus 1. And the question now is how we build these temporal models. In this dissertation, I examined various modeling approaches, starting with the baseline and ideal scenario of personalized models. In this setting, we use the data of each individual in order to train a model, acknowledging that each individual is unique and everyone is experiencing their own characteristics. So in chapter 3, I started the exploration using personalized models, and specifically, I examined 2 different types of models, and consequently, 2 different types of interactions. Typically, interactions are linear, where we see when one variable changes or increases, the other changes accordingly. So here we see the example of sad and tired. When the variable sad increases, the variable tired also increases in this case. However, in practice, mental disorders are more complex, so we expect the interactions to be more complicated and probably nonlinear. So to assess the performance of personalized models, here we compare the performance of nonlinear and linear models. And we found that nonlinear models gave a better performance, indicating that nonlinear interactions could better represent EMA data and mental disorders. But often, the challenge is that we don't have enough data for each individual, and this makes training a model very complicated and even impossible in some cases. So to cover all these cases, we explored group-based models. In chapter 3, I continued the exploration using group-based modeling approaches. In this setting, I used the data of all individuals within the same EMA study to train a model. And in this case, there is one generalized model that fits all. To assess the performance of group-based models, I compared it against the baseline personalized nonlinear models. And we found that group-based models increase the performance, highlighting an improvement of 17% compared to personalized nonlinear models. So this shows that adding more individuals could improve the model performance. However, now group-based models contain too broad information using all individuals in one EMA dataset. So we need to go closer to the individual. To go closer to the individual, here we explored clustering with an aim to refine the input data of the group-based models by using only similar individuals. In chapter 4, I approached clustering based on time series similarity. Here, I will give you a very simple example. Here we have a dataset, for example, with 3 individuals, where the first 2 have a very similar pattern, starting high and then gradually declining, whereas the third has a very different pattern, has very frequent changes. So clearly, the goal here is to group the first 2 individuals together and the third separately. To do so, we need to find the most appropriate similarity measure to capture these time series patterns. In this chapter, we specifically explored 2 different distance measures, dynamic time warping, or DTW, and global alignment kernel, or GAC. And we found that GAC produced a better performance in the case of noisy simulated data that probably resemble the real-world dataset. So choosing the right similarity measure was the most important choice we need to make in clustering in order to uncover meaningful groups or clusters. In chapter 5, we continued the clustering exploration, and I used a different approach using model-based clustering. So instead of using the raw time series data to represent each individual, in this case, I used characteristics derived from models. These can be, for example, regression coefficients or feature importances. And then using these characteristics, the goal is to, again, cluster individuals and find the most similar ones. The final goal then is to use this information, the information of the clustering, to train separate cluster models. To assess the performance of model-based clustering, we compared it against the methods that we examined previously, personalized nonlinear models and group-based models using all individuals. After experimentation, we found that model-based clustering produced the lowest error. So improving the model relevance, we could improve the personalized performance. Moving to chapter 6, we wanted to evaluate the clustering results that we derived from the previous chapters using explanations. In this setting, we use the clustering result as the input to train interpretable deep learning models. In this case, we used attention mechanisms because they could handle multivariate time series data and consequently multivariate time series clustering. Then, after analyzing the attention weights, we could provide insights and explanations on different levels: cluster level, feature level, and individual level. Here, I will show you an example on the cluster level, where we can see the most important features per cluster, how they are, what are the similarities within one cluster, and how they differ across clusters. But of course, it's always important to see where each individual stands within its own cluster. So explanations could help to validate clustering, but also uncover key characteristics about each cluster. So where are we now? We have seen clustering, which can give you some shared patterns across similar individuals, but the goal is again to go even closer to the individual. So then, then I tried to put more focus on the individuals by using transfer learning. In chapter 7, I specifically tried to balance the personalized and group level insights using transfer learning. In this setting, I have one individual as the target, and then some similar individuals, or the individuals derived from the clustering, as the source. Then, using the information of the source, we could learn some knowledge that could be transferred back to the individual in order to improve its knowledge and data. To assess the performance of transfer learning, we compared cluster-based transfer learning compared to the baseline personalized nonlinear models. And we found that cluster-based transfer learning could improve the performance compared to personalized, and specifically, we highlight an improvement of 10.7%. So this shows the importance of bridging personalized and group-level insights. To conclude, I would like to summarize some of the most important findings of my dissertation. We started with the baseline personalized approach, and we found that nonlinear interactions could better represent EMA complexity and the complexity of mental disorders. But the amount of data per individual is often limited, so we then explored group-based models, which increase the model generalizability, but again, they are quite far from, they can ignore individual insights. So to improve this and to go closer to the individual insights, we first approach it by clustering, by refining specifically the input data of each group level, and then by transfer learning, where we put a special focus on the individual, and we showed that by balancing group-based and personalized insights could improve the individual performance, but also improve our understanding about the individual variability. Thank you. And now I will give back the word to the prorector.
Dear candidate, thank you very much for your presentation. Before we proceed with the opposition, let me briefly introduce this committee to the audience. On the other side, we have Professor Weiss, Dr. Spanakis, Professor Roefs, and Dr. Waldorf, who are the supervising team. Waldorp, sorry. And on this side, we have, on the far end, Professor Jamnicki, Dr. Zako Gianni, Professor Wienans, and Dr. Hortal. And Dr. Hortal is the acting secretary of this committee. And online, our committee is completed by the participation of Professor Borsboom. And finally, my name is Thuisman. I'm representing our rector for this meeting. In the next 45 minutes, we will ask questions, or we, the members of the assessment committee, will ask questions, and the opposition will be opened by the chair of the assessment committee, which is Professor Wienans, who is a professor of machine reasoning and the chair of the Department of Advanced Computing Sciences at this university.
Thank you, Prorector, for introducing me. Dear candidate, dear Mado, I've read your thesis with much pleasure as it discusses a rather interesting topic of the deployment of AI in the field of psychopathology. I hope I pronounce it correctly. Many of your results have been published in strong venues. I especially liked how well this thesis is written. My compliments, which I would like to extend to your supervisors. Of course, I still have a couple of questions. My first question relates to the use of so-called synthetic data. As in your use case, in many domains, there is sometimes not enough data, which leads to the use of synthetic data that is artificially generated by applying a particular methodology. Now, in my field of game AI and search, we are using since the 1970s so-called synthetic game trees. And what we learned there is that we sometimes added too much structure and then it became not very realistic anymore, or we added too much randomness, which meant there was no structure anymore. Now, when reading your thesis, it appears that this is for your use case less problematic, because in subsection 3.31, page 51, you state the following. Due to a lack of access to large EMA datasets, you say we follow a simple method for generating random EMA datasets. So I start now to wonder, is this that simple? How do you know that your synthetic data represents realistic data? Or even when it does, how do you know that it is not too trivial or too challenging? Or how do you know that you haven't created a bias that favors a particular methodology that you want to test? So I was wondering if you could elaborate on your statement that it is rather simple in your case.
Dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. It's a very interesting question, I would say, and I knew it would come up at some point, because it was also one of my concerns throughout all this work, because I used simulated data in 2 chapters of this dissertation. But let's start with chapter 3 that you mentioned, where I used a very simplified, let's say, approach, because the target was to train a binary classification task. So I tried to simulate to approximate it in a simplified way, the data of EMA, the characteristics of EMA, like changing the number of features, the number of participants, the amount of noise. So I tried to apply all the characteristics that are in general challenging in our task. And also another point is the imbalance ratio, which is quite important in such data sets. So I used it as a proof of concept, let's say. So I tried to use it as a first approach to see, to test, to experiment, and to validate my methods, and then to go to apply it to real-world dataset, because by then it was used in the first chapter. We didn't have our dataset that we collected during the project.
Okay, I have a follow-up question here. So after now doing this research with synthetic data, also for the audience here, which consists of PhD students who might also consider the use of synthetic data. What are the so-called do's and don'ts when using synthetic data? When should you use it? When shouldn't you use it? And what should you consider?
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think, I think it's a valid, good approach to start with, but you should be very careful how to use it, how to simulate the data. So it should quite closely resemble the real-world data and the challenges that you want to test every time. And now I would a bit approach it differently by trying to be based on the real data that we have now, for example. I could use generative models to apply on the training data that we have now, and then to generate more and simulate it in this way, so in a more sophisticated way, I would say, and not so simplified.
Okay. Now, let's now stop with this synthetic data discussion and move to more real data. Because in chapter 3, you compare your personalized with your group-based approach for different data sets. And then at the end of subsection 3.51 at page 61, you also make a statement here where you say that due to the complexity and variability within the so-called ThinkSlim2 dataset, this dataset appears to be a better showcase for the strengths of the so-called group-based method over the so-called personalized methods. And you use the verb appears. That shows a kind of hesitation. So I was wondering why this hesitation? Could there be some other factors here that you didn't take into account? And how would you show this? So I would like to know a little bit more about this data set.
Yes. I agree with you. I mean, there are many factors that could change the performance of the model, and we indeed found a very large heterogeneity across individuals, even in this dataset. So the poor performance can come from many different factors, like data quality, because we are talking about ratings from people, so not subjective data. Data quality, I mentioned the number of points, the imbalance ratio, so the missing data, all these points could change the performance of a model. So these are all possible reasons that a model for one individual could not work well.
Okay, so these are the other factors that could have had an influence.
Yes, and maybe more.
Maybe more than, okay. Yeah, I think it becomes now a little bit more speculation. So, but
yes, because in every case it's different. It's very case specific, and in one individual maybe we can find that there is no variability in its data set, or we can find that there is a distribution shift during the test because we split it sequentially. So maybe after some time the distribution changes, and maybe for that individual we find very bad performance because of this, because training and test are not very different.
Okay, thank you for this elaborate answer.
Thank you.
The opposition will now be continued online by Professor Borsboom, who is a professor in psychological methods at the University of Amsterdam. Professor Borsboom.
Thank you. I would also like to extend my congratulations to you and to your supervisors for writing a very creative dissertation in which you apply a lot of advanced and new methods to get a handle on individuals and the relation they have to groups. And you also do a lot of work trying to combine these two sources of information, the population and the individual. And you do this to a large extent by clustering, searching for homogeneous subgroups that are more homogeneous than the general population is. And if these subgroups would be stable, reproducible, that could get us information for prediction and for treatment. And a very important question that you tackle is how to interpret the models. In a standard cross-sectional research design, it's quite simple to figure out what the important features of the data are that determine class membership, but in a multivariate time series, it's not so easy. And in chapter 6, you develop an approach which I found very interesting and creative, where you train a neural network to learn which features are important in determining class membership in your statistical model. And I have some questions about the approach that you propose there. So as I understand it, but please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not an expert in this particular application. These networks, like deep neural networks, they're highly over-parameterized. So they have a lot of parameters, and that advances their predictive capacities. But you use the model not for prediction sake. You use it to understand how the prediction, how the clustering works, and which features determine cluster membership. And I was wondering if a model is trained to predict cluster membership, that means the weights are configured so that that prediction works out. However, if you find one successful prediction model, it doesn't mean that there isn't another that's nearly as good or as good. In other words, these models do not yield what in statistics you would call identified parameters. So what I was wondering is, if your model parameters aren't uniquely determined, like the weights in your neural network, does that mean that different networks would produce different attention values? And does that mean that different networks would identify different features of the data to be important in determining cluster membership? And yeah, that's a problem that would be called identification problem in statistics. And I was wondering to what extent you consider, whether my reading is actually correct, to what extent you consider this a problem in your approach, and whether you have any idea on how to address that and how to examine the robustness and the uniqueness of the identified features in predicting cluster membership.
Dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question and your kind words. Your question was quite broad. I don't remember, I'm not sure if I remember all the sub-parts of this question, but you were focused on chapter 6, where I used the deep learning model for explanations. I used a deep learning model which is not by nature interpretable, but I used a specific one using attention mechanisms which, after some analysis, could provide some indications, some insights about what is happening inside, what the behavior of the model is. And I used, in this case, deep learning because they could inherently handle multivariate time series data. And this problem was quite difficult, more complex than the previous, what we addressed in the previous chapters, because now it is multivariate time series classification. So we tried this more advanced method for this reason, that could handle inherently our data. But of course, these are complex models that include a lot of parameterization, needs experimentation, and this is all part of the testing and evaluation of the model. And we try to compare it with baselines like LSTM's more straightforward models. So one way to understand if the model is good or it is parameterized enough is through the performance, which showed that the specific approach that we explored, the specific framework that we designed, is well validated. So we expect that the parameters, the attention weights in this case, could yield insightful results. But yes, these are not by nature interpretable, as I said. This needs a bit of analysis. So we tried to do some correlation to the raw data to understand where each individual stands in this, in order to give us some indication about the possible connections that there are within the data, of the underlying data, what is common within its cluster, what is different. And of course, but the final step is to be validated by the clinicians and the people in the field, so the psychologists and the clinical experts. We should understand if this makes sense, if these clusters are meaningful. So all these analysis had to lead to a clinical translation to understand if they are important or not.
Okay, but suppose you run this model and you train the network and you identify that enjoying social interactions and positive effect are the important features, and the clinician may interpret that as you done a lot of machine learning magic, and they will accept that. But if somebody ran the model again, what is the guarantee that the model would end up with the same features? What if a second time, because it's a neural network, it would configure its weights differently? And because it can do that, right? So it's not identified, so it can come up with a lot of different settings. And in prediction, it's not really a problem. But if you give this to clinicians, what if the second time they ran the network, it would be negative effect? So it's important to secure the robustness of the model result, as the model includes, can vary from time to time. And I also see that in your splitting the data and validating it in table 6.1, you discuss a pretty significant drop in the effectiveness of the model, and that might also be related maybe to that. But so I wonder, if I ran the model a number of times, what would be my guarantee that I would end up with a stable interpretation?
Yes, your point is very relevant. I think if it was for this model to be used in a clinical setting, there should be accompanied with all the parameters that we have run this model after the clinicians and the people in the field would validate it as a trustworthy model. If something is meaningful, we should stick to that. But then if we run it again and different importances appear, and they can still validate it by the clinicians, then this may show different parts of the data. So I think that the key point is for them to understand, or to understand that something is important and meaningful. But yeah, there is always the risks. That's why I try to avoid it in the previous chapters, the deep learning and very also black box models. But it can give you an indication. So I think that it's a valid approach to test the validity of and to disentangle the content of its cluster.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm out of time. I'm not sure. I'm looking.
If you still have a short question, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I had one small thing in addition. So it seems to me that the approach looks at features and time patterns. And I was also wondering, especially given your interpretation when you talk about complexity, and then you're often interested in correlational patterns between variables. So I was wondering whether these are used in this kind of technique, and if not, how you could use the technique to spot important interactions.
Sorry, can you clarify again? We're still in chapter 6, you're talking?
Yeah, so I didn't fully understand how the joint distributions of the variables, so for instance the correlations between them, how they are used in the model, and whether you could say anything about whether particular correlations between variables, for instance, are important. I did see correlations between the attention values, but that seems something slightly different.
Yes, I think in the that's why we explored attention weights in different levels, and I think on feature level we examined interactions between features. So we showed how, and so in general this approach shows which are the most important time points within one data set. So we should see what is happening at this time point. So by checking what is happening underlying the important time points, we could see the interactions between the important features, or in general across all features, to see this second level of relationship between features, not only across which is the most important feature, but also the interactions and interconnections between features.
Okay, so if I ran the model and I looked at the correlation patterns for individuals within a cluster, I would get similar patterns, and that would also turn up in the correlations between the attention values.
Yeah, of course.
Very short, please.
Our data set was not so homogeneous, so in the beginning we presented the average correlation, but of course an individual can differ across this average. So you could test the average effects, but also you should see where the individual correlations are in this range of the cluster correlations.
Thank you.
Next question. The opposition will be continued by Professor Jamnitsky, who is a professor in computational social sciences at this university.
Dear Mado, I'd like to congratulate you for a very clear presentation and a well-written dissertation. I appreciate the challenges of working in interdisciplinary areas where, in this case, you had to translate between feelings, symptoms to numbers, and then from numbers back to diagnosis. My first question is, in this space of interdisciplinary research, or not necessarily, but generalizability. So my question is, how would we know when your solutions could be applied to a different problem, different data? How would you think of suggesting, for example, some of your solutions to apply for a different field? Because in many cases you have time series or other numerical representations of the data. What characteristics of data would deserve your solutions? Let's put it this way.
Dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. Yes, it's very interesting and a relevant question. Yeah, how this would be approached in another, yes. We need to find the challenges that we addressed in this, and that we handle and addressed in this data set. So I guess this is a very common, these are very common challenges, like having a less limited amount of data per individual, having a lot of variables. Maybe it's subjective variables as well, because it's about data that people input in the system. So I guess these characteristics can be also seen in other fields, in other, in maybe chronic disorders or like diabetes or something. Even in monitoring, health monitoring of elderly could be addressed. So we should check the challenge that we found, and if this can be also identified in a different field. So I think in all the time series, in all the fields with a small amount of time series, could be benefit by all these group-based approaches or the more advanced approaches I proposed that require to find similarities across the dataset and take advantage of this to improve the performance.
So short time series would be one characteristics.
Yes.
But does it mean really short time or few signals in a possibly long time?
No, in our case we have a lot of variables that we collect. So this is also part of the complexity, the amount of features regarding the small amount of time points. Mm-hmm. So I would say the most important is the number of time points, mm-hmm. the number of missing data, which this leads to imbalance class for classification.
Because I would imagine your solutions can be applied outside health care as well.
Yes.
Monitoring of anything,
yes,
including sensors in the wild or who knows, other things that...
Yeah, about sensors, this could be a bit more complicated because we also had data from sensors that I didn't directly apply it in my case. But so this would complicate a bit things because we need to extract meaningful features from this. For example, we had collected data from GPS location, or mm-hmm. So we need to find relevant features that could help in the prediction. And another difficulty is the frequency. That with sensor data we have more frequent data, so we need to align with the small short time series, or to or in general to separate it in windows and then extract, take the average or something.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another question, and I think I'll be shorter to make room for others. We are working in a very fast-moving field, and since you started your work, generative AI tools came alive, especially LLMs. And you have a synthetic data generation part in it. How would you apply, or would it make sense to apply generative AI models like LLMs to generate synthetic data in your case?
Yeah, thank you for your timely question. Yeah, I think I mentioned it also before that these generative models and LLMs could greatly benefit. We could benefit from that to simulate data. For example, we could prompt an LLM to get relevant, more in quantity data that could resemble EMA data.
Would you change the focus of your work? For example, would you ask more from fidelity metrics to check that it's not total nonsense? How would you approach LLM as generators in your case?
I think I would check in literature to see what we are supposed to get in EMA and what are some characteristics, some known interactions that we would like to see in the simulated data and would very easily prompt it to an LLM, or get different data sets from that, get a lot of examples. But also LLMs could greatly apply it for the explanation, so for chapter 6, I think. And these could greatly help because they are also more interpretable by the clinicians, so it wouldn't be that problem with attention, weights, and all these issues that complicated the communication between the two words.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The opposition will now be continued by Dr. Zarko Gianni, who is an expert in human-centered AI at this university.
Thank you. Dear candidate, congratulations.
Can you switch on the sound, please? Ah, it's on. Okay,
it's on.
Good.
Okay. Congratulations for your work. You did a very nice work, and interdisciplinary work. Congratulations to your supervision team as well. Your dissertation was very well written and structured, and your presentation today, I found it very nice and simple, and thank you for this. I have a couple of questions, also myself. I will try to keep it as short as possible. Regarding data biases, so it seems that you have complex data. That kind of data, AMI, are complex data. And I would like to kindly ask you whether you would expect data biases in this data, because if we have data biases in this data, for example, imbalanced data, one data bias is that, but there might be other data biases. How can we apply some machine learning techniques maybe to detect these data biases? Because if you have data biases, this will definitely affect the performance of the model and the outcome of the models. So could you imagine how could we detect data biases in order just to make sure that these data sets are representative enough to apply such kind of analysis?
Dear esteemed opponent, thank you for your question, your kind words. Thank you very much. Yeah, the question is very interesting, and we were struggled a lot by this, all these biases, like data quality and quantity, data missing data, data imbalanced, the quality about what people perceive about the ratings. There can be there is variability within this domain. For example, maybe there are individuals that underestimate or overestimate their ratings, which in this case we tried to pre-process it individually. So we could try to scale it, for example, from 0 to 1 to have the same range for all individuals in case, especially when we try to merge.
I was just wondering whether, for example, you had biases in terms of at the level of population, more depressive individuals, for example, compared to bipolar individuals at that level, biases.
Yeah, but in this level, I would propose to go to the last approach, which is the transfer learning. So use only the similar individuals within the model. So having, for example, depressed and people with comorbidities like depressed and anxiety. So not very dissimilar people, because this also produces negative transfer. But yeah, there are also missing data that we could approach it differently. For example, we could take advantage of the sensor data that we complementary have, and understand whether these missing data are missing at random or not. So they could infer some knowledge in this case. So we could handle this bias by this way in the future, for example.
Okay. Thank you so much. You have used mainly the nearest neighbor cluster, and I've seen today on your slides that the distance measure plays a crucial role. I would like to ask whether it would be meaningful in your case to also explore more sophisticated clustering techniques, for example, the self-organizing maps.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, in the clustering, the available options are
Many, yeah.
yeah, there is no limit in this. But we try to keep it simple, to keep some like k-means, hierarchical clustering, and focus more on the distance measure, because this is the most important to be able to understand and find the similarities and the alignment in the time series. So we try to keep it simple because of interpretability, to be more, to be able to understand if the result is valid or not. And of course, alternatives like deep learning or SOMs or these are possible and could maybe enhance the results. But yeah, these are just one of some approaches that could be applied.
Okay.
I think.
Thank you. And one last question, a little bit about the impact, the clinical impact. In very simple words, what are you delivering now to the clinicians? What kind of tools are you delivering now to the clinicians? For early detection, for monitoring, which are the challenges? Imagine your work part of a system that it is operating under real-life conditions. Which is the main contribution from a practical point of view?
Yes, very interesting question. I think these models could easily be integrated in EMA apps that collect the data. So all these models could run in the background, for example, and they could. And the aim of these is to predict the next time point of all these symptoms. So we could predict symptom deterioration or improvement. So in the case of symptom worsening, we could use it as an early warning signal model. And if we want to understand, so this gives us the question when in the intervention. So this could say when we should apply an intervention, but also when it gives us also the what we need to intervene on, because if we open the black box and we see what the model defines as the most important things, we could start on these factors and understand what is the most important thing that leads to this deterioration, so we should intervene on that point.
Clear. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The opposition will now be continued by Dr. Ortal, who is an expert in machine learning at this university.
Congratulations, Mado. I would like to extend it to your supervision team. I will try to be fast, but I would like to invite one of the panelists to read Proposition 6, please.
While applying a model to data is a relatively straightforward task, evaluating and interpreting the results is far more complex. This highlights the necessity of interdisciplinary collaboration, ensuring that findings are both methodologically sound and clinically meaningful.
Thank you, Thales. My question is that, given the complexity of your models, so I have two questions here. Given this complexity, how do you ensure that the output is not only statistically valid, but also relevant for the clinicians, are interpretable by them? And the second question is to ensure this applicability, which is the effort that you did in your dissertation with the clinicians to understand how interpretable your models are or how applicable they are in clinical practice?
Yeah, one moment. Yes, highly esteemed opponent. Thank you for your question. Yeah, that's a very clinically relevant point because it's very easy for someone to apply a model, especially there is a misconception, especially for people outside the data science field, that we can apply a model and the job is done. But behind this, there is a lot of experimentation and testing and validation, cross-validation of the models that need to be done to understand that, to make sure that the model is technically correct. But at the end, there should be also be meaningful for the clinicians. So that's why we were focused on, I think, the whole dissertation on interpretable models. So to be able to translate the results to a clinician and them validating the models. So by interpreting, by finding the most important factors, the most important characteristics that a model is based on to make a prediction, and providing this to the clinicians, they could understand if the model is meaningful, because having only a technically correct model is not the goal of in the field of in the high-risk fields like the medical or psychological field.
But did you try, for example, to check with clinicians, like you learn 3 clusters, right? If these 3 clusters, the patients inside each cluster, make sense for them to be together or not?
Yeah, during all this work, I tried to communicate this with clinicians through explanations, through concise examples. But yeah, this data set was quite heterogeneous, I could say. Mm-hmm. So in any case, I think we would find not very homogeneous people. So we need to understand what is the common factors that everyone more or less exhibit. But it's very important to see how each individual stand within this its own cluster.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Before the lady nicely invite us to finish, I would like to ask you about the clustering technique that you used. You went up to 20 clusters, right? For your data set, that means
in one case, yes,
that you have in average 9 patients per group, right? In average, in the last data set. So, did you check how this approach of 20 clusters is similar to the individual models, because they are not that different, right, in size?
You mean the behavior of the model, or yes, the interpretability?
The variability within the cluster, actually. Because you are mentioning also with Dr. Winan's question, this heterogeneity of your data, right?
Yes.
So how compact are these clusters? Which is the variability there?
Yeah, in all these clustering chapters that we addressed, clustering, I explored very different evaluation methods, starting from checking the quality of the clusters, how compact, as you said, is, and how distant is from the most similar cluster. So this is one way to check the quality. The second evaluation is through the group-based models. So I tried to test if the clustering result could be applied to a model, because that's one of the goals, to use it, to use this additional information to a model to make better predictions. And the third evaluation was through explanations. So we tried to understand, how compact is a cluster by providing explanations and unraveling all these common characteristics or different characteristics.
And do you think that the data is enough to train these models when you have only 9 participants?
Mandani Ntekouli, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company await our return in this room for the results of our deliberations.
Thank you.
This way.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side. 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the line, I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Take the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. And even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you won the battle once you've grown. South side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Mandani Ntekouli, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Hoefs is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Mandani Ntekouli, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal of the university.
Dear Dr. Ntekouli, dear Mado, it is my privilege, my honor, and above all my genuine pleasure to be the first one among your supervisors to congratulate you on reaching this milestone in both your career and life. In every PhD project, there are these pivotal moments for the supervisors, those inflection points that you begin to understand how the project will unfold, who will be on time, will challenges arise, how are the publications going. And I think in your case, we didn't have any issue at all, which is not the common case. And I think, thinking a bit backwards, I remember one of our first conversations around maybe November 2020. For those of you not remembering, it was preparation for lockdown number 25. And as supervisors, we were constantly concerned about your well-being. So I asked you, how are you doing overall? And I think without hesitation, you responded, I'm okay, I just wish I had better results from my models, which is the response I guess every supervisor needed to hear at that point, because you were focused, grounded, and resilient. Even if I had any doubts afterwards, I think it was at some other NSMD event with Anita, who I see in the room, and I think we were discussing after your presentations over wine, and she told me, Mado gave a really good presentation, I will tell her. And anyone that knows Anita knows she's not joking about work or wine in that sense. During your PhD, you published 7 papers, you contributed to our courses, you supervised students, and I think that the number, of course, is impressive, but what is also noteworthy is that during the end of your PhD, you had grown into these fully independent researchers, coming with your own ideas, driving your work, and standing confidently behind your contributions. We often say, somehow anecdotally, that the product of a PhD is not the thesis, which your parents hold very proudly, but the person who emerges from the process, the researcher. And I think in your case, this is very accurate. there is quite literally no one that has met you and doesn't have any kind words to share. Colleagues from an SMD project, colleagues from DAX, everyone speaks with you with great warmth and respect, both for your personality and your research qualities. That is rare and special to have already built, and I think it's one of the reasons that in these weird times for academia, the department worked in order to ensure that you have a postdoctoral position with us, which was an opportunity that was not handed to you, it was earned. So before I close, I would like to extend my gratitude, of course, to my fellow supervisors. You needed 4 of us to guarantee the validity of your work. Maybe on a personal note, I've been working with Anna and Gerhard since my arrival in Maastricht, so I hope that you have drawn some invaluable lessons from them, like I did. And of course, Lorenz was always supportive, even the distance between Maastricht and Amsterdam. Also, my gratitude to the NSMT consortium, Anita, the big boss, as you mentioned in the dissertation, and other members. The members of the assessment committee for all their contributions and completing their assessment sometimes in challenging time frames. And of course, congratulations to your friends and family, whether they're here or tuning in online. I know everybody's looking forward to what seems to be an early drink. So I have one last comment. I think in your last proposition, you quote something from Aristotle about excellence. I think it's indicative of your classical Greek training. I think there's another quote about Aristotle which I'd like to read. Excellence is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. Choice, not chance, is what determines your destiny. Mado, you have chosen wisely, you worked diligently, and you stood gracefully here today among friends and colleagues. Congratulations to what seems to be just the beginning of your academic journey.
Thank you very much.
Dear Dr. Ntekouli, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I congratulate you with the doctorate degree that you have just required. My congratulations also go to your supervisors, your partner, your family and friends. Now, before I close this meeting, I would like to thank all members of the degree committee and especially those coming from far. Your participation is much appreciated, no matter whether on-site or online. After closing this meeting, we will all go to the reception in the refectory, and outside the sun is shining, so it's a beautiful day today, where everyone can congratulate our new doctor. But before we do so, we will use the opportunity to take some pictures with the candidate and the full committee and with the family, and we'll do that in this room and on the stairs in the hall. But before we close this session and we close the internet connection, let me offer our online member the opportunity to congratulate our candidate, Professor Borsboom.
Yes, Mado, thank you for letting me participate in your defense. And as you know, the network approaches have been important in setting up this research project, and I'm really proud that that these ideas led to creating uses of data and new methodologies to analyze them. I wish you a lot of success in your and enjoy the day and have a drink for me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending this historic day in the life of Mado Ntekouli, and I now close this academic meeting.